When you sing it now, then, does it have a different meaning?
I've lived the dream, I'm living it now, and I don't want it to go away.
Susan Boyle disappeared for 2 years after something terrible happened in 2022. But that wasn't the only secret she was hiding. Her own family had been tearing her apart for years over money. One brother even made threats that left Susan sick with worry. She gave away $1.8 million to relatives, but it only made things worse. Now at 64, Susan has finally returned with a shocking confession about what really happened during those dark years. Susan Boyle's life began on April 1, 1961, at Bangor Village Hospital in West Lothian, Scotland. She was the 9th and youngest child of a working-class family. Her mother, Bridget, was 47 when she gave birth, a risky age for pregnancy, especially at that time. Doctors warned that having the baby could endanger both mother and child. But Bridget, a devout Catholic, refused to consider ending the pregnancy. The Boyles lived in a small home in Blackburn, and Susan's birth added more pressure to a family already struggling to make ends meet. From the start, Susan felt like the odd one out, setting the stage for many of the difficulties she would face. Susan's first moments were marked by crisis. Her mother suffered from preeclampsia during birth. This caused Susan to be briefly deprived of oxygen. Doctors told her parents she had mild brain damage from the birth. This label followed her for years. At school, she was called a slow learner. She struggled to keep up. Teachers didn't know how to support her. Peers mocked her and Susan felt like she didn't belong. The idea that she was damaged haunted her for most of her life. Home wasn't a safe place either. Her father Patrick had fought in World War II. The war left him with deep scars. He returned home angry and unstable. The Boyle household, already tight and poor, became filled with fear. Susan often became the target of her father's violent outbursts. She endured both physical and emotional pain. Even so, Susan later said she loved her father, believing he fought demons he couldn't control. But the damage shaped how she saw herself and how hard it was for her to trust others. School offered no escape. Susan was bullied daily. Her epilepsy caused fainting spells that classmates found funny. They gave her cruel names like Susie Simple and Touchy. Teachers didn't help. Instead, they hit her with a belt. Sometimes almost every day. Susan felt small, forgotten, and hurt. Yet, despite everything, this difficult childhood helped her build an inner strength no one saw coming. For almost 50 years, Susan lived with a painful misunderstanding. Everyone believed she had brain damage from birth. Teachers, friends, and family treated her as if she were less capable. In 2012, at age 51, Susan saw a specialist. The truth shocked her. She had Asperger syndrome, a form of autism, and her IQ was above average. The old label had been wrong. This new understanding finally made sense of her struggles. It gave her relief and pride. Susan could finally see herself clearly without shame. When Susan was 25, she fell in love for the first time, but her father stepped in and destroyed it. Without telling Susan, Patrick ended the relationship. He answered the phone one day and told the man she didn't want to speak to him. Soon after, the man had a child with someone else. Susan's heart broke. She never forgot that pain. It changed the way she saw love and trust forever. While her 8 siblings moved on and built their lives, Susan stayed behind. She became the caregiver for her aging parents. After her father died in the 1990s, she devoted herself to her mother until Bridget passed away at 91. Susan's world became small. She rarely saw friends. She gave up her own dreams to care for her family. While her brothers and sisters built careers and families, Susan felt trapped. In 1995, she took a brave step and auditioned for the TV show My Kind of People. Susan had sung in local pubs and choirs, but this was her first chance at national fame. The nerves were too much. She shook so badly she could barely sing. She didn't make it on TV. The rejection crushed her, but she kept singing at home and in local spots, holding on to her dream. In 1999, Susan recorded Cry Me a River for a charity CD. Only 1,000 copies were made. The local paper praised her voice, calling her performance heartbreaking, but almost no one heard it outside West Lothian. The world would not discover her gift until 10 years later. That same year, Susan spent all her savings to make a professional demo tape. She recorded Cry Me a River and Killing Me Softly with his song. She mailed the tapes to record labels and TV stations across the UK. No one replied. The tapes disappeared without a trace. Susan felt crushed. It seemed like no one wanted to hear her. In 2000, Susan Boyle's world fell apart. Her beloved sister Kathleen died suddenly and everything changed. Kathleen had always been Susan's biggest supporter. Her death hit so hard that it shattered Susan's dreams. Up until then, Susan had been singing at local venues and church events in her small town of Blackburn. She had hopes of making it in music. But when Kathleen was gone, Susan stopped. She couldn't bear to sing. For 2 years, she didn't perform, didn't take lessons, didn't even go near anything that reminded her of music. The sadness was so deep that she locked herself away. The silence in her life matched the emptiness in her heart. Kathleen had always pushed Susan to share her gift. And now that voice was gone, both the voice of her sister and the one inside Susan herself. When 2002 came, Susan slowly found her way back to singing. But by then, her world had shifted. Her focus turned to her mother, Bridget. Bridget was in her late 80s and frail. She needed Susan's care every day. So Susan stayed in the small council house where she had grown up and built her life around her mother. She cooked, she cleaned, she watched over Bridget. And Bridget in return kept Susan's dreams alive with words of encouragement. She would remind Susan, "You have a gift and you must use it." The two shared everything. Their bond was strong, but it kept Susan's world small. Her mother's faith in her was the one thing that kept hope flickering. Even as Susan's own ambitions faded into the background, then came another heartbreak. In October 2007, Bridget died at the age of 91. For Susan, it was like the world ended all over again. Bridget had been her anchor, her rock, and now that rock was gone. Susan fell into deep grief. She stopped singing. She hardly left the house. For almost 2 years, she lived in silence and sorrow. Friends and neighbors grew worried. Susan seemed to have lost the will to do anything. The dream she once held on to so tightly seemed to vanish with her mother's passing. The house that had once been filled with music was now filled with nothing but quiet and loss. During this time, Susan became a recluse. The little house in Blackburn became her whole world. Curtains stayed closed. Neighbors rarely saw her. Days would go by without Susan speaking to another person. She only had her cat, Pebbles, for company most of the time. She didn't go to church. She didn't attend events. She even stopped caring about how she looked. The home that had once been a place of love became a place of mourning. It stayed that way until late 2008 when something inside Susan began to stir. Susan had made a promise to her mother before she died. And in 2008, she decided to keep it. She would audition for Britain's Got Talent. She was 47. She was unemployed. She had never performed outside of her community. But none of that mattered. She was determined to honor her mother's wish. So, she filled out the form and went to Glasgow for the audition. It was scary. She doubted herself, but she went. She later said, "I wanted to prove to myself and to everyone else that I could do it." That promise, that single act of bravery changed everything. It was the start of one of the most incredible stories in show business. When Susan Boyle walked onto the stage at the Clyde Auditorium in Glasgow on April 11, 2009, no one took her seriously. She was 47 years old, wore a plain gold lace dress, and had messy hair. People in the audience rolled their eyes. Some laughed. The judges, Simon Cowell, Amanda Holden, and Piers Morgan, looked at each other with disbelief. When Susan said she wanted to be as famous as Elaine Paige, the room filled with sneers. Cameras caught people smirking and whispering. It felt like everyone had already decided she would fail before she even opened her mouth. Then Susan began to sing, "I Dreamed a Dream" from Les Miserables, and everything changed. The room went silent. Simon Cowell's jaw dropped. His eyes widened. Amanda Holden stared, amazed. Piers Morgan smiled in surprise. Within seconds, the judges went from doubtful to dazzled. When Susan reached the powerful part of the song, the crowd jumped to their feet. The applause was deafening. Simon later said he had never been so shocked on the show. That performance became a viral hit. Millions of people around the world watched the video and felt the same awe. The standing ovation that night didn't stop at the theater. By the next morning, clips of Susan's audition were all over the internet. Within a week, more than 25 million people had watched it on YouTube. In just 9 days, that number shot past 100 million. News outlets like CNN, BBC, and the New York Times reported on her. Susan Boyle's voice had touched people everywhere. What started as one performance in Glasgow became a worldwide sensation, reminding people that real talent can come from anywhere. After the song ended, Amanda Holden spoke words that echoed across the globe. She said, "I honestly think that we were all being very cynical, and I think that's the biggest wake-up call ever." People repeated that quote again and again. It made everyone think about how easily they judge others. Amanda's words became part of Susan's story, a reminder that talent has no age, no look, no limit. The audition became a symbol of breaking down shallow standards in show business. Susan's life changed overnight. Celebrities like Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher tweeted about her. By April 13, 2009, she was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Her video was being viewed at a rate of 1.5 million times per hour. She appeared on news shows and was invited to the Oprah Winfrey Show. Reporters from more than 50 countries wanted to interview her. Even her church in Blackburn, Scotland, became a tourist spot. People from as far away as Japan came to see where she used to sing. In just a few days, Susan went from unknown to global superstar. Susan returned for the semi-finals on May 24, 2009. This time she sang Memory from Cats. The pressure was huge. She was the last to perform that night, which made the wait even harder. But when she started singing, the magic was there again. The audience cheered. Amanda Holden called it absolutely spellbinding. Susan got more votes than any other act that night. Her performance proved to the world that her first audition wasn't just luck. Before the final on May 30, 2009, Susan was the clear favorite. Bookmakers offered odds as short as 1.66. About 75% of all bets were on her. Her audition had been viewed nearly 200 million times by then. In Blackburn, pubs and community centers held watch parties. The demand was so high that the show was streamed live online for the first time. Everyone believed Susan would win. But when the final votes were counted, the result stunned the nation. Out of over 17.3 million viewers watching, only 20.2% voted for Susan. The street dance group Diversity won with 24.9%. The shock was felt across the world. Even in places like Azerbaijan, people were talking about it. Susan, ever gracious, congratulated Diversity on live TV. She said, "The best people won. They're very entertaining. Lads, I wish you all the best." But many viewers were left in disbelief. Right after the show, rumors spread that Susan was upset backstage. Some reports said she ran down the halls shouting, "I hate this show. I hate it." Others claimed she threw water on a floor manager. Crew members were said to be shocked. Some people close to Susan said the reports were exaggerated, but the story showed how much pressure she was under and how hard sudden fame can be. On June 1, 2009, the UK woke up to shocking news. Susan Boyle, the 48-year-old Scottish singer who had won hearts on Britain's Got Talent, had been rushed to the Priory Clinic in London. This wasn't just any clinic. It was the place where celebrities and even royalty went when they needed help. Just the night before, 19.3 million people had watched as Susan lost the BGT final to Diversity. That loss hit her hard. She broke down in tears, shouted, "I hate the show," at producers and threw a glass at hotel staff before fainting. Paramedics arrived and took her to the Priory, saying she was suffering from exhaustion and an emotional breakdown. By then, Susan's fame was massive. Her audition had already been seen more than 220 million times on YouTube, making it the fifth most watched video in the platform's history. Even Prime Minister Gordon Brown wished her a speedy recovery. Newspapers filled their front pages with the story, calling it a warning about the price of overnight fame and the pressures of reality TV. The media didn't stop there. They flooded Susan's life with endless stories and questions about her mental health. Some reports went so far that even rival journalists called it inhumane. Reporters waited outside her home and bothered her family. Some were even sent on strange missions like pretending to propose to her just to see what she'd do. The Press Complaints Commission stepped in. They reminded editors that their code of conduct banned this kind of invasion of privacy, especially when it came to mental health. This moment became a key lesson in media ethics. It showed how dangerous and cruel press intrusion could be. Behind the scenes, Simon Cowell knew things had gone too far. For the first time, he offered to release a contestant from their tour contract. He told Susan's family he'd tear up the deal if that's what she wanted. "No one's going to force her into the recording studio. I'll do whatever Susan wants," he said. In the world of reality TV, this was unheard of. Usually, stars had no choice but to follow through with tours and promotions. Simon admitted later that this was one of the hardest weeks of his life. He took the blame and said, "I'm the first to hold my hands up and admit I've made mistakes." His offer changed how the industry thought about looking after its stars. Everyone expected Susan to be in the clinic for a long time. But just 3 days later, on June 4, 2009, she left. She shocked the public by announcing she'd joined the BGT tour. After all, her recovery seemed almost impossible. She spoke later about how scared she had felt in the clinic. There were no phone calls, no TV. She felt alone and unsure of herself. For 2 days, she doubted everything. But in the end, she realized she was just exhausted and needed rest. Her decision to come back was seen as a sign of great strength. Her family and fans stood by her, ready to support her return. Susan didn't just come back. She amazed everyone. She performed at 20 out of the 24 BGT tour dates. She sang in cities like Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Dublin, Sheffield, Coventry, and Birmingham. Crowds gave her standing ovations. Reporters said she looked like a seasoned performer. The tour was a huge success, both for the fans and for Susan herself. Susan Boyle's rise to fame felt like something out of a fairy tale. When she released her debut album, I Dreamed a Dream, on November 23, 2009, no one in the music world was ready for what happened next. In just 1 week, she sold 400,820 copies in the UK. That broke the record set by Leona Lewis's Spirit. In fact, she outsold the entire rest of the UK top 5 combined. But the shock didn't stop there. In the US, she sold 701,000 copies in her first week. That made it the biggest debut by a solo female artist since SoundScan began tracking sales in 1991. Globally, the album crossed 2 million copies in its first week. By the end of 2009, Susan had sold over 10 million copies worldwide. That was more than Eminem, Rihanna, or Lady Gaga managed that year. The demand was so wild that Amazon named it the most pre-ordered album in their history. Some stores couldn't even keep it on their shelves. What made this even more amazing was that just months before, Susan had been an unknown volunteer from a Scottish church. Her success didn't stop with that one album. In less than 2 years, she became the first woman in UK history to have 3 consecutive albums debut at number 1. I Dreamed a Dream in 2009, The Gift in 2010, and Someone to Watch Over Me in 2011 all shot straight to the top. Only legendary acts like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had done anything like it before. And Susan did it at 48 without years of grooming or training by the industry. The Gift even topped the charts in both the UK and US at the same time. She was the first female artist ever to achieve that. Her rise showed that talent could break every rule the industry believed in. The money that followed was just as staggering. In her first year, Susan earned $5 million. Today that would be about $8.5 million. Before all this, she lived in council housing in Blackburn, West Lothian, and got by on disability benefits. By the end of 2009, her debut album alone had brought in over $9.5 million in sales. Her net worth soon reached between $35 million and $40 million. The world was fascinated by how a woman from a small Scottish town became one of the highest-earning artists on earth in just a year. In 2012, Susan had a moment that felt like the peak of it all. On May 13, she sang Mull of Kintyre at Windsor Castle for Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee. The pipes and drums of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards backed her as millions watched on television. Just 3 years after her Britain's Got Talent audition, she was singing for the Queen. The applause was overwhelming. She even met the Queen after the performance. For many people, it proved that Susan had become a true national treasure. By 2021, Susan had sold over 25 million records around the world. Her first album made up 10 million of that, but her later albums kept selling well, too. Her records went multi-platinum in the US, UK, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand. I Dreamed a Dream hit 4x platinum in the US and 7x platinum in the UK. She outsold many pop stars with much longer careers, and she did it all without a big label push before her breakthrough. But behind the scenes, Susan's sudden fortune tore her family apart. In June 2010, her relatives tried to hold a meeting to clear the air about the money she had given them. Not everyone showed up. The absences deepened old tensions and split the family into 2 camps. Susan felt trapped between them. She even blamed herself for the fallout, telling her brother Jerry, "I'm the bad one. It's all my fault." Then in 2013, things got worse. Reports came out that Jerry had threatened suicide unless Susan gave him $50,000 to save his business. Susan handed over the money, feeling she had no choice. She was sick at the time, battling a viral infection and tonsillitis. Jerry later denied making any threats, but the damage was done. The family's trust was broken even further. Susan made matters worse by lying to other relatives. She told them Jerry had blackmailed her because she couldn't bear to tell the truth. When Jerry confronted her, she broke down and admitted she had made up the story. She just wanted to stop the fighting. But the lie only deepened the wounds. Things reached a breaking point in 2015 when Susan gave a relative a large cash gift. When the relative didn't thank her, Susan became upset and tried to reach out. Her messages were seen as harassment and the police got involved. They visited her and asked her to stop contacting the person. The incident highlighted how much pressure Susan felt from her fame and family troubles. Over the years, she had given around $1.8 million to relatives. In 2010 alone, she handed $55,000 to each sibling, plus $55,000 to her nephew, Alan, for a business that never took off. She funded another niece's photography business with $45,000. She paid for maternity packages and gave jobs to family members. Her niece Kirsty even got 5% of profits from her first 2 albums. But instead of bringing the family closer, the money drove them further apart. Susan Boyle's life took a dramatic turn in December 2013. At the age of 52, she found out something that changed everything. For decades, she had believed she had a learning disability. Doctors at her birth had even said she was brain damaged because of complications. But after all those years of confusion and struggle, the truth came out. She had Asperger's syndrome. The diagnosis explained why she had always found social situations so hard. Growing up in a working-class family in Scotland, she had faced bullying and felt out of place. Now she finally understood why. She felt relief. Even better, she learned that her IQ was actually above average, not what people had told her. This new knowledge helped her see herself clearly for the first time. It gave her strength to speak out for others who faced the same hidden challenges. For Boyle, the diagnosis was late, but it changed her life forever. Just a year before, in 2012, another health shock had hit. Susan was at the top of her fame when doctors told her she had type 2 diabetes. It meant she had to change how she lived or risk losing everything, including her singing career. She gave up her beloved sweets and cakes. She started eating healthy and exercising. By 2016, she had shed 28 pounds. By 2018, the total loss was 50 pounds. When COVID-19 came, the danger felt even closer. Doctors warned her not to take chances. A simple infection could be deadly. So, she isolated strictly, protecting herself. Every day since that diagnosis, she has had to stay careful, watching her diet, managing her health, and still finding the strength to share her music with the world. In 2014, something beautiful happened. For the first time in her life, at age 53, Susan found romance. During a U.S. tour, she met a doctor in Florida. He wasn't a fan. He just recognized her and started a chat. They had lunch the next day. Susan said he was a perfect gentleman. He paid for lunch and gave her a sweet kiss on the cheek. That simple date meant so much to her. She had once admitted that she had never even been kissed. The doctor's name stayed private. Her team had panicked when she went missing, afraid she had been taken. But she was safe. And for Susan, the moment showed that it was never too late for new experiences. Even after so many years of loneliness, money never changed Susan Boyle's simple ways. Even after earning $22 million through records and tours, she stayed grounded. She lives in the same modest house where she grew up, which she bought for $65,000. Later, she bought the house next door for $111,000 to have more space. Her spending stayed small. She allowed herself just $300 to $500 a week. She shopped for groceries herself and avoided luxuries. Her biggest treats were a fur coat, a piano, and a bike she barely used. Money, she said, was like water in a desert. It runs out. She focused on safe choices like property and music projects, not wild spending. This kept her secure and close to her roots. In April 2022, tragedy struck. Susan had a stroke. It almost stole her voice and left her weak and struggling to speak. For over a year, she fought to recover. It was a battle, but she was determined. She dreamed of singing again. And on June 4, 2023, she made it back. On the stage of Britain's Got Talent, she sang I Dreamed a Dream. The crowd stood, many crying. Simon Cowell called it the most moving performance he had seen. Susan had done what seemed impossible. She proved that strength and hope can bring you back from the darkest places. Her recovery wasn't quick. For almost 3 years, Susan worked harder than ever. Daily speech therapy, hours of practice, exercises to retrain her voice. Coaches who had helped opera and Broadway stars taught her. She had to rebuild muscle strength on her left side. She wrote about her journey, noting each win. The day she held a note for 10 seconds, the day she sang a full verse. By early 2025, after over 1,000 hours of work, she got back 90% of her voice. Doctors called it a miracle. Then, on her 64th birthday in April 2025, Susan returned to social media. After 2 years of silence, she posted a simple message. I'm back. Definitely back. Thank you for waiting. New music, new dreams, new beginnings. 500,000 likes, 50,000 comments. She shared news of her upcoming projects, a documentary, a charity single, and live shows. She showed glimpses of her recovery, of her first vocal exercises, of joyful reunions with her team. It wasn't just a return. It was a promise. Susan Boyle was not done. She was ready to inspire the world once more.